So let's get into the basics of an assessment system and starting to define some of the terminology from within. So I can't say it enough times that this is all a gray area. Districts define things in different ways, and that's not wrong. We just want to make sure that for the purpose of this, we're sort of landing on the words we are going to assign to different purposes of assessment. So let's start with just the basics, just-in-time short cycle assessments. So in other words, what some people put into the bucket called formative assessments. And we are really going to refine that a little bit further throughout this presentation and what we mean by that. Interim assessments, so those seasonal periodic assessments are the second bucket, and then summative being sort of end of learning or evaluative assessments. We're going to dig into each of those. So just-in-time short cycle assessments or formative assessments. These are here really to provide data to inform the instruction that follows. And at its best, that means the instruction that follows with students in the room. You're evaluating data and going through that together. It should happen with all students, and we say all students purposefully because every student should be receiving not only Tier 1 instruction, and has the right to receive all of those grade level standards, even if in an adaptive form for some students. But that means that all students should also be participating in a formative assessment process within that Tier 1 instruction. And it should be happening in an ongoing and continuous way. This really is, at its best, woven into and a part of the instruction itself. So some examples might be quick quizzes, some pre-planned common assessments that maybe a PLC has constructed together or a teacher has constructed ahead of time. Discussions, observations, comprehension checks, entrance and exit tickets, and some tools that provide some of those are, there are some assessment platforms out there with item banks, including Inspect Plus, along with DNA, which is a place where you can display that data, or other platforms. Many other platforms contain formative assessment questions that you can use. Otherwise, sometimes it's formative assessment methodology. People like Dylan Williams has built a career on formative assessment strategies for the classroom. Interim assessments. So the purpose of interims is to really measure standards proficiency for students, but in more of a periodic seasonal dipstick check kind of way. So this is can also have some formative qualities, and we're going to talk more about the formative qualities of interims, but it's a less frequent seasonal assessment that you're giving kids to really check the health of the standards health of students, classrooms, sites, and districts. So they are standards aligned common assessments that are administered, and in most cases common. That depends on the size of your district. Sometimes there's only one algebra class, and so you're giving one fall algebra interim assessment, for example. And then a lot of times your curricular resources have some vendor provided interim assessments already created for districts. And then again, there are other item bank platforms out there that come with pre-built interim assessments in them. So we listed Inspect Plus, there is one example of that. Then summative assessments. Summative assessments are really about evaluating and certifying the learning that happens, again, in a periodic or seasonal way, or just really at the end of a unit of study, which in some cases comes at the end of the year, the end of a course, or in some cases just, again, the end of a period of learning for a student. It's meant, the big thing that signifies it isn't as much the frequency as it is the fact that you are evaluating or certifying learning, and that's the major purpose of the assessment. All students take summative assessments, and some examples, of course, the ultimate example is the state standards assessment that happens at the end of the year or in April or May for most districts in most states. They are standards aligned common assessments, so sometimes they are created in district or sometimes they are provided again by the vendor of your curricular resources. And it could include things like Inspect Plus or just classroom summative assessments created by teachers or by PLCs. So this is the process and sort of the ends of the spectrum. Assessment of learning is really about evaluating or certifying learning of students. So it's meant for evaluation. It's to determine status or grades or some of those metrics that we often assign to students come from summative assessment, which is sort of ironic because it's the other types of assessments that move them to that point where we can certify their learning or determine the grade. So assessment for learning includes assessment used for the purpose of giving teachers feedback so they know how to guide their instruction going forward, or know how to refine their instruction based on the guidance the assessment's giving them. So it's about responding to student need. This is sort of where it used to end, but now we've moved over to assessment as learning or assessment is learning. This is the process in the moment with students where you're providing feedback and the students are self-assessing, thinking about their thinking with metacognition. And it's a sort of dance between students and teachers and between the content and the students and teachers, going back and forth in this ever sort of evolving process in the classroom.